Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the first Torah study lunch and learn of the fall 2024 semester here at Torah Law School. The topic I wanted to speak about today is the legality and really the Jewish medical ethical perspective of paying a live kidney donor. So before we begin the Jewish medical ethical part, you have two handouts in front of you. Handout number one says dollars for kidney Torah law. And the other one is, the first page says Malia Takis introduces bipartisan and kidney death act. This is very, very, very recent. There is a act in front of before Congress, which is right now is bipartisan legislation to basically it's highlighted here. A $10,000 refundable tax credit for 5 years, per year for 5 years, i.e. $50,000 to living kidney donors. If you take a look at the statistics are pretty clear that even though, thank God, we have something called dialysis, so someone who has end-stage renal disease can live, but it is clear that the lifespan on dialysis does not equal the lifespan of someone who got a kidney. So donating a kidney, receiving a kidney, especially from a live donor, will definitely increase people's lifespans. And therefore, it's called the End Kidney Death Act. Right? If you look at just every year, thousands of families lose a loved one waiting for a kidney transplant. It is devastating because it is preventable. Our bill is simple. We encourage people to donate a kidney, and in return, the government gives them a tax break. So the reason, just a quick background, if you take a look at the next page, this comes from the Hastings Center, but it's just a nice way. We have something called the National Organ Transplant Act. That it's a federal law that bans selling organs. Now, there are a few body parts you can sell. For example, if you are a female, you could sell your eggs. If you are a male, you could sell your sperm. If you are a female, you could rent out your uterus to be a surrogate mother. Correct? So we have certain things that you may sell. Nevertheless, you may not sell organs. Why? If you take a look here, the basic idea is that there's a biomedical ethical principle called justice. And even though this act will let both rich and poor people buy, since the federal government is paying, so there is no like rich people buying and poor people selling, nevertheless, who's going to sell their organs? Only people who need money. No one's going to sell their organ unless they need the money. Now, of course, we are proud that there are people who donate altruistically. In fact, there's a wonderful organization called Renewal that has facilitated over 1,000 altruistic kidney donations, primarily in the Orthodox Jewish community. That being said, there's not even close to being enough kidneys donated altruistically. So to encourage people to give, to donate, we were willing to pay them. But we're very clear, we're very honest that who are going to be people who will be selling? Only the people who need $50,000. So, and that's right now the proposed price. Obviously, it could change. So if you take a look here, what the criticisms, the reasons, it's people will be coerced, that it might be, it is definitely creating a two-tiered system where poor people are using their bodies to sell. Now, again, this is relevant to many other topics, like I don't use like prostitution, maybe, where can a person sell their body for what society considers immorality? That's right. Why not? You have autonomy, right? So what is acceptable? So this is not we could talk about from a secular perspective the biomedical ethical principle of justice, but we're just going to for now say that as of now, until this End Kidney Death Act passes, it is illegal in America. The only country in the world where it is legal to buy a kidney is Iran. Wonderful. And there are countries in the world that everyone knows where if you go on the dark web, you can buy a kidney from probably a prisoner or in countries that might have red flags. So there are places you could go on the dark web, you'll be able to buy a kidney, and you'll come back with a healthy kidney. I was speaking to a cardiologist, and yes, he knew that someone all of a sudden had kidney disease, was gone for a few weeks, and came back later with a healthy kidney. No one asks questions. So, but it's illegal, and again, it's probably unethical because the people giving kidneys, what?
Is there any criminal repercussions?
No one's, who knows how it happened? There's no one's. You can't really trace it. What? It's a miracle. He happened to have been vacation in a country that might have a lot of people who somehow it happened somehow or other, or I don't know. Okay, so let's be honest. So that's what happens today. What is the Jewish medical ethical perspective on this topic? So to be clear, if you look at the original responsa on the matter, the original responsa on the matter dealt with a very simple question: Is it dangerous? Is it okay? Is it for those? There's a lot of food and there are handouts. So please take whatever you'd like, either handouts or food or both. No problem. Just I do want to say one thing. It is being recorded. So no, you're good. Everyone's good. They have this new thing over there, so we're good. Okay. So we were talking about the Jewish medical ethical perspective on selling kidneys or paying for kidneys. So there are two handouts. One that says $1 for kidneys, Torah law, with Hebrew English, and the other one, we just did quickly the possible act in front of Congress.
Since we're at a short break, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, always questions are always welcome.
Is there a technical difference between selling a kidney and receiving a tax break?
So the question is there a difference between selling a kidney and receiving a tax break? A tax break is just the government. No, it's the same thing. As of now, any compensation whatsoever to a donor is considered illegal. So be it a tax break or money or a car or whatever it may be, it is illegal, and this act aims to change that. But to make it that it's not rich paying poor, if you involve the government and the government will pay for it, so then by definition, there'll always be money around so anyone can receive. So it aims to change half of the exploitation where only the rich get. So if the government pays, everyone can get. But at the end of the day, only the poor are going to sell. And that's the exploitation that we're trying to avoid. So if you look at all the responsa originally on this topic, the question was harm. Is it harmful to donate your kidney? So in 1961, when the first tshuva was asked, the answer was yes, it's dangerous. In 1970, 1980, we are living in an age, thank God, where donating a kidney is absolutely in the immediate 90-day post-donation statistics, it is very, very safe. If you look at this handout that says Malia Takas, if you look at the fourth page has 30-year trends in preoperative mortality risk for living kidney donors. So you have the statistics. This is a very recent study. It was just published in JAMA, August 28th, 2024, less than a month ago. So it's a pretty recent study. And for those of you who know how to read medical studies and statistics, it is insanely safe. Thank God. The amount of deaths and complications post 90 days post-surgery is almost nothing. So therefore, it is very, very safe to donate your kidney. So if you look here, I just have it on top of the Hebrew handout. I have the original sources where you have to put yourself at risk, save someone's life. That was how everyone dealt with the question originally. That was very relevant, again, in the original response. It's not relevant today. Now, I do have one question that there's no good answer. If you take out the next piece of paper after that study, it's from the British Medical Journal, Lifetime Risks of Kidney Donation and Medical Decision Analysis. And this is actually a very, very statistically dense paper. If you could just draw your attention to where on the left-hand side where I made a little arrow, where the conclusion, live kidney donation may reduce life expectancy by 0.5 to 1 year in most donors. So that means if you take two 40-year-olds, and statistically, one 40-year-old donates their kidney and one 40-year-old won't donate the kidney, so the non-donor will live 0.5 to 1 year longer than the one who donates a kidney. So one will live till 120, and one will live till 119. Right, you all got that, okay? Is that called, this is a question that I don't think any rabbi has ever addressed. Now, I'm not going to address it. I'm just going to pose the question. Is that called shortening your life? In other words, if you take, just really, really quickly, the halachic source that we have, we know that we have to save other people's lives. Do you have to risk your life to save other people's lives? So if you take a look at this handout now, the famous Yerushalmi, where Rabbi Ami was trapped in a place of great danger. Rabbi Yonatan said, let the dead be wrapped in a shroud, meaning I'm not risking my life to save him. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, I will either kill or be killed, and he went and appeased them. And there's a big debate whether or not you have to, or you're allowed to, or you have to risk your life to save others. Is it called risking your life if you lose over your lifespan 1 year of life? You're not going to lose it immediately. It's not in 10 years, not in 20 years, not in 30 years. It's overall statistics. It's a very good question. You know why it's a good question? Because halacha has never dealt with statistics. Same way people ask me, like, right? If I ask you, where does it talk about cars in the Talmud? What's the answer? It doesn't talk about cars in the Talmud. There was no cars in the Talmud. So where does it talk about statistics in the Talmud? You know what the answer is? It doesn't. Because statistics, the idea that you look back at history, you have all this information, and you look backwards, and then you make decisions, is not a Talmudic way of looking things. They didn't have statistics, and they didn't think statistically. So how would you view statistics that someone who donates a kidney over the next 50 years might lose 0.5 to 1 year? Is that a sakanat nefashot? Is that dangerous? No, it's not dangerous, because again, right now it's not dangerous, but a lot of you know people who donated kidneys. Thank God. We live in a community sometimes that is really unbelievable in donating altruistically kidneys. And they tell the people who donate kidneys it's very low risk. And they're right. If you take a look here, it says there's very low risk post-operative. But then many of them will be told, we're approaching Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is in, 4 weeks from 2 days ago, right? Are you allowed to fast at Yom Kippur if you donate a kidney? So they tell you it's not a good idea because you only have one kidney. If you get dehydrated and then you could harm your kidney, then if you only have one, right? 1 second, I just thought you told me it's not dangerous. So is it dangerous or is it not dangerous? So the answer is, of course, it's not really dangerous, but you have to take extra precautions. So what if I told someone it's not dangerous, but you can never fast again Yom Kippur? Now, would you donate a kidney then? Right? It's an interesting. Again, I think everyone should donate, and even if it comes at the cost of fasting on Yom Kippur, you're saving people's lives. But every Yom Kippur for the rest, right? So these are halachas that are not discussed. No one discusses it because it's very hard to think about what is the idea of risk for the future. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I think it's this study, again, also 2017, pretty recent study, I think opens up a very interesting halachic question, how to view risk and sakanas avashas in our statistics-based system, right? We all agree that probably I shouldn't be drinking this. Drinking these chemicals is probably not the best thing for you. So am I being sakana, putting my life at risk by drinking Diet Coke? I hope not. But if you'll ask someone and say, no, I mean, if you drink Diet Coke every day till you're 120, you live a long life. Anyway, so
We make a comparison, like let's say you're an EMT,
right.
I'm an EMT or a police officer, and they, there's a higher, statistically speaking, there's a higher risk an EMT or a police officer is going to have decreased life expectancy, but you're saving pukul nefesh, you're saving somebody's life.
Right.
So it's just viable in that sort.
Right, and so that's you brought up the question, like what is considered normal life, and it's irrelevant to statistics. Not only do we need police officers and EMTs, right? It's considered a normal thing to do. So it's a great question. I want to get back to that a little bit later, but that's exactly the point. So going back to where we started. So the original response on this topic of donating kidneys was analyzing the risk. I don't think there is a risk. So if there's no risk, so what's the question? There is a very interesting question. And this is this is a room of both future lawyers and future medical practitioners. So just a little bit of a law question. Is the sale or the contract binding? Can you make a binding contract to sell an organ? Now, again, I'm not asking in American law, it's illegal, so I'm not even asking that. I'm talking about in a Jewish-only world. Is there a contract to sell a body part? Now, this is a very sore topic for Jews. One of the most anti-Semitic works of Shakespeare is called The Merchant of Venice. In The Merchant of Venice, for those of you who did not go to schools that read the Merchant of Venice. I have the Wikipedia, the last 2 pages of this handout is the Wikipedia summary of the Merchant of Venice, for those who don't remember. But just quickly, in the Merchant of Venice, there is a person who needs money. And today, when you need money, you get a mortgage or you get a student loan. And that, in the Merchant of Venice, Shylock, the Jew, demands a pound of flesh as collateral. I'll lend you $1,000, but if you don't pay me, you got to give me a pound of flesh. And that's the whole story. Then he doesn't have the money, and then he wants to collect on it, and then they claim he can take the flesh and not the blood. And that's the Merchant of Venice. The only, I guess, saving grace to the Merchant of Venice was if you look at the last page, there's a very famous speech given by Shylock saying that a Jew is a regular person. Hath not a Jew eyes, hath not a Jew hands, organ, dimension, senses, affections, and passions. And so there is one saving grace, but it's generally considered a very anti-Semitic work of Shakespeare, which again is always weird that Shakespeare was anti-Semitic since he never met a Jew, since Jews were kicked out of England in 1290, and when Shakespeare wrote his works, Jews had not yet been let back into England. So you just see how pervasive anti-Semitism is when a person for 300 years hasn't met a Jew, and yet still will use the Jew as the enemy and the person who's greedy enough to demand a pound of flesh. So this is a good question. Is it legally binding, the contract for a pound of flesh? Or is it legally binding, you give me $1,000 and buy my kidney, or $50,000? This was one of the first people who spoke about this was Rabbi Zevin. Rabbi Zevin was a very famous rabbi, and he actually was bought, if you take a look here, it should be, at the bottom right there are numbers. So this is on page 7. So he actually wrote about Mishpat Shailok and Halacha. If you take a look now, just back to page 1, the Gemara talks about that I have the right to say, I'm letting you break my phone. Right? I'm allowed to say that to you, and it's a binding deal. So someone says, one who says, blind my eye or cut off my hand or break my leg, you have to pay no matter what. But even if I exempt you, you're liable. But if I say tear my garment, break my jug, then if I say on condition that you're exempt. So I'm allowed to say, if you break this, you owe me $1,000. If I tell you break it, I'm not going to hold you liable. I'm allowed to do that. So I'm allowed to make a contract for you to do something and not hold you liable. But if I say, I'm allowing you to punch me in the face, you're not allowed to do it. If you punch me, you have to pay me. So it seems like there are some contracts that are unenforceable when it comes to bodily harm. So maybe, possibly, if I make a contract to sell my kidney, which is bodily harm, or even if it's not bodily harm, it's who said that I'm the owner of my body? Rabbi Zevin makes this case, and he uses the phrase that we say in Slichot for Ashkenazim in about 2 weeks. I know I'm saying already, but in Ashkenazi here on page 2, in Ashkenazi Slichot we say God has the whole seas, He made it. He has the dry land, He formed it. Haneshama lach v'haguf pa'alach. God, the soul is yours and the body is yours. Sorry, the body you made, and we say Haneshama lach v'haguf shalach. The soul is yours and the body is yours. And if you go back to page 7, Rabbi Zevin, and I underlined it, I wrote an arrow, it says, you don't own your body. And therefore you can't make a contract and you can't sell your kidney. That's what he says. I have a very big problem with this. I don't have an answer to this. Rabbi Zevin is no longer alive, so I can't ask him. But if you take that logically, then you can't even donate your blood. And you can't altruistically donate your kidney. So how could, in other words, if you take what he said logically, that you don't have control or ownership over your body, you wouldn't be able to donate. The only difference between donating and sale is whether or not I get compensated. So how could Rav Zevin say that I am not allowed, I don't own my body, therefore I can't sell it? I wouldn't be able to give it either. And he even says it, like straight up. If you look carefully, again, I didn't have this in English, I apologize for those who read Hebrew. It's on page 7. You can't do any business. And they're not grabbing, they're not binding. He says straight up, you can't donate it. So, again, you look everywhere and anywhere, almost every rabbi is pro donating blood, donating a kidney altruistically. I don't have it in front of me, but Rav Asher Weiss, one of the leading of our generation, Jewish medical poskim, is like he almost thinks that it's obligatory that if you match, not about kidney, but if you match blood or bone marrow, you're obligated. Not even that you could, you're obligated. So if you have to donate, then what's the difference in selling? If you're okay with saying never, you can't decide to give away your body, great, I get it. But he doesn't say that. So I have this problem. I can't ask Rabbi Zevin, but it really bothers me that he says this. All the rabbis seem to be pro-donating, so then what's the difference? Why can't you sell? So that's where we're holding. Truth be told, if you take a look here on page 6, so it's got a little 6 on the bottom here. If you take a look, I have a little arrow on the left. The only real source that we have that dealt with this question, so this sefer is called Nishmas Avraham. They have it in both Hebrew and English. It's written by Avram, a doctor, who wrote the book. It's really 4 volumes on medical halacha. Article translated into English. If not, you can get it in Hebrew. It's available. It's actually a free download on Hebrew Books. Just to give credit to, there's a man named Tzvi Reisman. He's actually chairman of the board of Torah University. He is also the patron of something called HebrewBooks.org, and he has made a lot of books available, tens of thousands of books for free to download. And since he also donated money to publish the Nishmas Avram, it's available for free download, all 4 volumes. It's available online at HebrewBooks.org. Thank you to Tzvi Reisman, again, chairman of the board of Torah University. So in Nishmas Avram, in 2 places, he quotes Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, also one of the leading rabbis of the previous generation. But again, this is not written anywhere. So if you take a look, if you read Hebrew, V'omar li. So this is only an oral communication from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach to the Nishmas Avram. So it's on page 6. If you're holding it in front of you, it's an arrow. My arrow's on the left. Shlomaisa gam hu matir. He permits donating. Ki mekivin sha'torem also mitzvah shel atzalas nefesh miYisrael. Since the donor is doing a mitzvah of saving a life amongst Israel. Now here's a parenthesis. Va'afilu him oseh ze rak avur kesef. Even if his whole intention is monetary. L'maisa yesh kan ma'isa hatzalah. At the end of the day, he's saving a life. What do I care what his intention is? So here we have, I would say, the primary source that says very clearly that if you're doing it and what the act is, the result is saving a life, it's irrelevant if there's money being paid. Okay, so it's seemingly pretty clear in Jewish medical ethics that one is encouraged to donate and one is even allowed to demand payment. Again, it's a source that it would be better if we had a response, an explanation, which we don't have, but at least we have an oral communication that seems to permit it and doesn't negate the fact that you're getting money. Now, I want to talk about 2 things. A, where does this come from? And B, but what about justice? And I'm going to use the Hebrew phrase that is very common, whether or not it's an actual medical, ethical, Jewish medical term, tikkun olam. So if you take a look at, we're going to skip now, if you could, I'm going to skip around for a second, on page 3. Page 3 talks about, we actually had this in this past week's Parsha. It's very interesting, but what the halacha is, you have to pay your workers on time. So if you're a gardener, if you have a gardener, and he gives you a bill, you have to pay him that day. 30 days, no 60 days, no 90 days. Now, goods we could discuss. So if you sell me the water bottle, we make a deal, I'll pay you in a year, right? You sell me your car, pay in a few months. But a worker, a laborer would be probably the better term, you have to pay that day. And again, it's actually very relevant for those of us who have children. If you have a babysitter, you actually have to pay the babysitter within the 12 hours of which she finishes, I assume it's she, but when she finishes, right, that's her job. Gardener, anything like that. It's a halacha. Why? The Torah says because person has to work is they need the money. That's the assumption. And the pasuk says, "Ve'elav hu noseas nafsho." He sets his soul upon it. So the Torah uses the word soul. So the Gemara then makes a little bit an interesting inference. If you take a look here, it's the middle of page 3, above Matzia 112a. For what reason did the laborer ascend on a tall ramp or suspend himself from a tree and risk death to himself? Was it not for his wages? How then can the employer delay his payment? So the Gemara, in a sort of throwaway line, but not really, says, you know the basis for this law of paying laborers on time is because they put themselves at risk, even a risk of death. So it's very, because again, because the Torah used the word your soul, so the Gemara infers, and it makes it like as an assumption that people go to work and they'll do jobs that their life is at risk. And the Gemara assumes that's okay. If you take a look at, actually, I know it's skipping, but if you take a look at what's page 8, in the last page, there is a famous question asked to Rav Moshe Feinstein. And I'm reading just quick, just the first line because it's funny. I was asked if one could get a parnasa, mischak, from the game of zrikas kadurim, shenikra ball, balaz. Can you make a living playing ball? I assume the question, it doesn't say it here, I assume the question is football. For those of you who engage in what is now legal called gambling on football or have fantasy leagues, right? You all know that the reason you lose is because your star player probably got injured. Like last year, if you had Aaron Rodgers, right? He got injured. Football players get injured all the time. I don't think I'm telling anyone something I don't know. Why is it mutter to play football? Is it mutter to play football? If you're an Orthodox Jew and you're a great football player, and when you go play football, and so if you're a running back, there's a very good chance that you're going to cause yourself to have concussions, right? If you're a quarterback, or you're going to get set, it's going to hurt. You're going to get tackled. Are you allowed to do it? Are you allowed to put your life at risk just to have a great salary? I personally think the National Football League is exploitive of young men who, for the short term, sell their bodies and souls for money. So yes, they'll have a great life maybe when they're 10 or when they're 20 years old and 30 years old, but when they're 60 or 70, they might have a very difficult medical life. They might, many football players have concussions, repeated concussions, and they have brain trauma. I'm not telling you anything anyone doesn't know. So why is it permitted? Rav Moshe Feinstein says, if you take a look here, he quotes this Gemara. So again, the last page, at the top of it, he says, so, and again, this would be back to our question that we started with. Is this a statistical danger? How do you view by statistics? Everyone thinks that, okay, one happened to me. But statistically, every quarterback's going to get a concussion, somewhere along the line. And every running back's going to, but do we look at statistics? Great question. We still don't know the answer to that. But Moshe Feinstein says that it says clearly in this Gemara that you're allowed for parnasa, for money, you can put your life at risk. That's not a problem. So then, if you'd ask me, what about selling your kidney for money? Is it something that are you allowed to put even if it would be risky, or even if it is risky, are you allowed to do something for money which is really not right? And the answer is yes. Now, are we okay with a world that there are people risking their lives? Not everyone, some people get to be doctors, PAs, lawyers, accountants, or some people get to be, you ever watch the guys chopping a tree? Right? That's dangerous. They got chainsaws, they're held by a rope, and they're 100 feet in the air. So why are they allowed to do that? It's seemingly a silly question. The answer is, that's part of life. There are people who have this job, people who have that job. Is it exploitative? No. Why not? I'm not sure. Because the Gemara says that's acceptable. I want to go back a second to the source we skipped, and that's source 2. There's a very famous story. And I think we'll end it was a very famous story in the Gemara. There were two rabbis sitting. I'm going to make it a little contemporary. There were two rabbis sitting in Kollel, Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan. And when you sit and learn and you don't go to get a job, what happens? You have no money. That's just normal. So they turned to each other, the Gemara says in Tainus, and they said, listen, we got to go get jobs. So they got up and get jobs. Now, why? Because they said if you look at the Torah, in Deuteronomy, in Dvarim, chapter 15, verse 4, it says in Hebrew, Efes kilo yeh b'cha evyon. God said there will not be needy amongst you. There won't be poor people. So they said, we're going to go get a job. So they go out, they get a job, they're walking, they take a break, they sit by a wall, and Rabbi Yochanan hears angels talking. And the angel says, let's kill these rabbis. Why? They were sitting and learning Torah, they were in Kollel, and they went to get a job. So Rabbi Yochanan nudges Ilfa and said, did you hear the angels? And Ilfa says, if you want to take a look, it's on top of page 3. So I didn't hear the angels. So Rabbi Yochanan understood that the angels were talking to him and not to Ilfa. So Rabbi Yochanan said, I'm going back to yeshiva, you get a job, I'm going back to yeshiva. And it happened that Rabbi Yochanan became the Rosh Yeshiva and Ilfa didn't. Great story. But Ilfa, the question was, Rabbi Yochanan, why did you go get a job? Because the verse said, chapter 15, verse 4 said there will be no needy people. Rabbi Yochanan said, yeah, but go 7 verses further. In Deuteronomy 15:11, right, it says, Ki lo yechdal evyon mikerav haaretz. There will never cease to be poor people in your land. It says, so now, that means, irrelevant to this very cute story, there's a problem in the Torah. Dvarim, Deuteronomy 15:4 says there will be no poor people. Deuteronomy 15:11 says there will always be poor people. There's a contradiction. There will be no poor people, there will always be poor people. So it seems like the Gemara seems to understand that it's up to you. That on one hand, yes, it's an ideal maybe there to be no poor people, but reality is there's poor people. So you get to choose who you want to be and where you want to be. So Rabbi Yochanan said, I'm going to be the poor person, I'm going to be the Rosh Yeshiva, and I'm going to be the poor person. That's okay. And the person says, I'm not going to be the poor person, and I'm going to put myself at risk, or I'm going to stay at Kollel, or whatever it may be, because you're not going to be the poor person. That's also okay. So it seems like this Gemara enters the contradiction by saying it's up to you. So that's sort of the question: is that our response to Tikkun Olam? As we started with, one of the main reason why in America it's considered unethical to sell kidneys, or at least to buy kidneys and sell kidneys, because it's exploited of the poor. Yes, there are poor people. Yes, poor people therefore have to sell their kidneys. It doesn't sit well. It's not nice, but that's just the way of the world, or no? And that's the question of Tikkun Olam, of justice. Can we condone a world where people will have to sell their kidneys to just have to get by in life? We're okay with it. So the Gemara says we're okay with people climbing a tree, putting themselves at risk. But again, if someone says, listen, I need the money desperately. Give me $50,000 and you can kill me. Right? We understand that would be totally immoral. No one would condone that. So what's the difference between putting your life at risk and killing yourself? So we understand that because it's only risk. So what level of risk? Why? But if statistically, out of the 1,000 football players, one's for sure going to have brain damage, and that's statistics. So then why is that at all okay? You are, again, when you watch football on Sunday, you are enjoying someone destroying their lives. I know that sounds harsh. Right? And there was a point, by the way, before Teddy Roosevelt, I'm talking about 100 years ago, football was a really dangerous game, and Teddy Roosevelt, the president, wanted to ban it. Or when football was just starting, you can look this up, he was too dangerous. They said it was really dangerous. They were like rugby. They would get into a pile and someone end up dead or broken bones. So it's a very dangerous and violent sport. For some reason, we're okay with that. So why is that okay? This is not okay. It's a great question. I don't have an answer. I want to end with one thing. I don't have time to do the source about doctors charging too much. 2 more sources that will go. There is one source of Tikkun Olam in the Gemara. It's a famous source. And I think we'll end with that today because it's also relevant as we're about a year, we're almost about October 7th again. And one of the most difficult questions that Jews have had to deal with ever is the question of hostages. There's a very famous Mishna. The Mishna goes like this. It's on page 4 from Gemara and Gittin. You may not redeem captives if it costs too much money. And what the Gemara says is, it's really a Mishna. The Gemara says something very, very heart-wrenching. If there are bad people in the world, and those bad people take hostages and captives, sometime in the Gemara even, there were pirates, there were bad people. And not only that, they said, if you don't pay us enough money, or give us what we want, we will kill that person. The Mishnah says that you don't pay more than the standard value. This was, again, for those of you who remember, this was the debate of the Gilad Shalit, when he was a hostage by Hamas, and they demanded terrorists in return, and eventually Israel paid a very high price, and not only pay a high price then. Part of what happened October 7th is so many of those who were released went back to their hostage taking and killing ways. So the Mishnah here says, but just in a monetary sense, if the hostage demands $1 million and the going rate for a human is 100,000, you do not pay the money. Now, what if you have the money? You have $1 million in your pocket. You have $1 million in the bank account. You have the money. The Mishnah says it's better for society to let that hostage die than you pay the money. Now, either it's because if you give them the money, they're going to keep taking hostages, or if you give them the money, the society will run out of money. Whatever the reason the Gemara is. But the Gemara is clear that it's okay to let a hostage die for the good of the overall society. Every person who needs a kidney is very sad because that person, even on dialysis, will have a shortened lifespan. But do we exploit society for the good of the people who are suffering? It's the same exact case. Maybe. Here also, if you don't give the person the transplants, they're going to have a shorter lifespan. But on the other hand, it's exploitative of the poor. It's creating an imbalance in society. Is this a source that we don't help society by harming society? We don't help individuals by harming society. Now, it's not the same. And that's what you would need big leaders, big rabbis, big poskim to decide. Is the price to society too much or not too much to save the lives of the people who are suffering and who need a kidney? I think, and we'll end with this, I guess, I think that it's again, just state the obvious. In America, it's as of now, it's illegal. If and when the End Kidney Death Act does pass and it becomes legal in America through the federal government to sell your kidney, I think that Jewish law, except depending how you understand this Gemara and Gittin, would be pro, and the exploitation of society would not be a factor in Jewish medical law. That's my understanding. Although I can understand if someone takes this Mishnah and says it does apply. Thank you for joining me. We'll do this again throughout the semester. But if I don't speak to you again, have a happy and healthy New Year to everyone in 2 weeks' time.